الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي خلقنا من ذكر وأنثى، فقال عز من قائل: يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم. وهو الذي جعل للرجل المسلم ولاية على المرأة المسلمة، وجعل للمرأة المسلمة ولاية على الرجل المسلم، فقال تعالى: والمؤمنون والمؤمنات بعضهم أولياء بعض. والصلاة والسلام على النبي الأمي الذي حرر المرأة في عهده ورفع من شأنها وأكرمها وكرمها وجعلها مع الرجل نصفان متكاملان، فقال عليه الصلاة والسلام: النساء شقائق الرجال. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it gives me a great pleasure to welcome you tonight to one of our lectures. I'm following tonight what our great professor Anne-Marie Schimmel did in the first lectures. But my subject is rather different, not as pleasant as what she did. I'm going to talk about something which is very controversial, very complicated, and rather sensitive. My subject is the political competence of women in Islamic law. And everybody knows how Muslims differ about this subject. If someone among the audience think that I'm exaggerating and he tells me, look at the map of the Muslim words, you find that most of them already gave women their competence or their political competence. I will look at the map. Of course, I will start with Indonesia. He will tell me, look, the vice president is a woman. And I will agree, but I will remind him that she was supposed to be the president. But certain parties raising the Islamic flag managed with their maneuvers inside the parliaments to bring Mr. Wahid, a half-blind person, almost retarded, with no experience except that he inherited a position from his father, and he became the president. And now they discovered his quality, and they're trying to get rid of him. And she will become the president, I hope. And if I move, looking at the map, coming toward the west, of course I will avoid Afghanistan because it's very embarrassing, really. I agree that Iran is a good example. Women there already started to show up, and in the elections that we will have very soon, of course 813 tried to run for that. A good number of them were women. They were not selected, they were rejected, not because they are women, for other reasons, and they selected only 10. And if I move, I find Kuwait. They have some sort of a democracy, and poor Kuwaiti women are struggling now in order to prove themselves, in order to vote and be elected. And they went 5 times to the constitutional court in Kuwait without any real results. We wish them good luck. Of course, we in Saudi Arabia are not facing any problem. Women, they don't have to struggle simply because men cannot vote or do anything. They don't even hope or dream of voting. But women do hope and dream, not to vote, but to drive cars sometime in the future. It might be a happy dreams. Of course, we in my country are annoyed with some of our small neighbors who started now adopting what is called democracy, and they granted women the right to vote and to be elected. Here I'm talking about Bahrain and Qatar, and they'll have a constitution. We cannot do much about it, but we don't like it. And the problem is that if you go in the Gulf, also you have Oman, already started since 1990, this trend of building something similar to a parliament with real power and authority. It is really annoying to us to see women in that parliament and to see women as ministers. Of course, if I go all around Yemen, the tribal country, they say they have women now and they are in the parliament and so on. It's annoying. So my friend who might draw my attention to this fact, I agree that to some extent it's right, but mostly those countries, we call them secular governments. We don't consider them as real Muslims. But the problem is there. And the problem is very serious, that we must really deal with. It's a question of, do they have the right under Islamic law so we can silence those voices calling for them to stay at home and get out of their houses twice in their lifetime, once from the house of the father to the house of the husband, and once from the house of the husband to the grave. Now, Islamic law is completely different. I wrote a paper. I wrote it in Arabic. It's rather lengthy. I'm not going to read it, because if I read it, it will take me more than 2 hours or so, and some of you might leave the place, and I hate to lose my audience. So I will give just a resume of that, but I really wait for your questions, and I hope I will receive some embarrassing questions, so we make the evening as fruitful as it should be. The paper is composed of 3 pieces. A small piece is the introduction, then part 1 and part 2. In the introduction, I meant really to show what was happening in the world before Islam. I talked about the Indians and their law. You will have a copy of the translation later on. I talked about the Greek and their law, the Romans, the Jewish people, Christianity, and then about Islam. Of course, you see a real gap. Islam was a revolution, no comparison whatsoever. And what was happening during the lifetime of the Prophet and the 30 years thereafter, during the 4 Caliphs, was completely different from what we see today and what we hear. This reminds me with a famous Egyptian, extremely religious person, but a scholar. He wasn't happy with the attitude and the behavior of the Muslim girls in Egypt. So he wanted really to write something to show them that they are wrong and they have to change their attitude. And he spent years. He focused on only 2 sources. For you who know about the Prophet tradition, the Sunnah, they know the Sunni Muslims, they have 2 sources who are really above any doubts. We call them Al-Bukhari and Muslim. 2 books, so many volumes, very authenticate. He didn't go to any other source. He was astonished that what he studied and saw is completely different. He found what was prevailing at that time is not very much different from what women are doing in Egypt. And he wrote 5 volumes named Tahrir al-Mar'a fi Ahd al-Risala, the liberation of women during the time of the Prophet. A very interesting book. And by the way, that book is forbidden in my country. So the first part, which is the introduction, deals mainly with what was happening before Islam, how women were treated, and the revolution which took place under Islam, when women became an equal part in the society. And of course, someone might ask me how equal this equal. There are certain exceptions, but only in certain areas. Something in lieu of something else, but they are completely equal otherwise. If they are not equal, it's for financial reasons. A burden is put on the shoulder of the husband or so. That's not my subject today. And then I wanted to show the change of circumstances. How does it affect the status of woman, which is very important. For instance, women in Mecca, where the Prophet was born, used to be very good mothers, very good for their husbands, but nothing else. But women in Medina, when the Prophet migrated, were completely different. They were dominant. They used to argue. And I put some references because everything is written here. You can go and read the references for it. Umar ibn al-Khattab, the famous second caliph, a great man. He was telling a story. He said, one day I shouted at my wife, and she answered me back. I was horrified. She said, why are you horrified? The wives of the Prophet, they answer him back. And sometimes they even don't talk to him the whole day until the night. And all the wives in the Ansari, that is the people of Medina, they answer back their husbands and they quarrel with them. So Umar kept silent, didn't have an answer. And if you see what happened in Medina compared to what was happening in Mecca, the same prophet, the same people, but the environment, the social environment had changed. Women in Medina, they used to go out, they used to argue, they have their place in the society. And this continued. And the Prophet was encouraging them to do that. And the Quran came also to encourage them. Then, after that, I have shown how there was a change, gradual change. The son of Umar, for instance, the Prophet ordered and instructed their people, don't you ever stop your wives and ladies from going to the mosque for the, what we call it, evening prayer, which is after 9 or 10 at night, and the Fajr prayer, which is about 3 in the morning. Don't stop them. But then, one of the sons of Umar, he said, no, I swear I will stop them. See, a change in the social environment. Even the Prophet passed away only a few years before. And then I explained how they went for the second empire, so to speak, the Umayyad Empire, in the city of Damascus, which is a non-Arab city. The Greek were dominating there with their social behavior, and women were veiled and so on. The caliphs, the rulers, they veiled their wives. It wasn't known because in Medina, no woman will veil except so exceptionally, and she will attract attention if she does that. And in certain places and worshipping, she was forbidden from covering her face. And gradually the noble Arabs there, imitating the people of Damascus, did the same. And then I mentioned how the Third Empire in Baghdad, when it took place, how the Arabs used to veil their wives. But then a man from Persia, Ibn al-Muqaffa, how he forced the others to veil. And he fought for that. I'm mentioning these things to show the setback. And then it continued showing the change of circumstances, that it will change the law itself. I gave one example which is interesting. One of the leaders of the 4 school of thoughts in Islamic law called Al-Shafi'i. Al-Shafi'i was in Baghdad, and he had his own opinions there. Then he moved to Egypt. The same man, the same time, the same texts from the Quran and the Sunnah, but different places and different opinions. And this is why those who are a student of Islamic jurisprudence, they know that Al-Shafi'i, in his jurisprudence, he had 2 sets of opinions. One we call it ala al-qadim, according to the old opinion, and one ala al-jadid, according to his new opinion. This shows how the jurist will change his opinion only because of a change of time. Of course, if it is a change of time, and place. There it's a change of place, but here a change of time and place. The change in rules will be more considerable, and we have to accept that. And according what we call it, usul al-fiqh, the basic jurisprudence, we have what we call it لا ينكر تغير الأحكام بتغير الأزمان. You cannot object if the law is changed because the time had changed. I don't want to spend much time on the introduction because it's the smallest part. Then I came to part one. And part one, I was there very objective, just to show you when you read it, the difference between those who are strongly against women and the way they interpreted the texts, or sometimes they even took something very weak to make it strong, and those who denied this and they thought a woman has the competence, a political competence. So that part is very important for you to see the two different of views and the way they interpret the law, the Quran, the Sunnah, and the various other sources of legislation. In Islamic jurisprudence, we have the sources of legislations, that is the Quran, the Holy Book, and the Sunnah. This is the tradition of the Prophet, what he said and what he did. And then something we call it ijma', the consensus. And on top of that, the al-qiyas, analogy, and then al-maslaha, the public interests, and something called sadd al-dhara'i. And it's not accepted by everybody. It means if there is a legal means which might lead you to an illegal end, you prohibit the legal means. Now, I just give you very shortly, because I don't want to spend too much time. Part two is more important to explain. They came to the Quran and they took two verses from the Quran. One of them is a series of verses, ayah we call it, addressing the wives of the Prophet, and specifically saying that this is for you, the wives of the Prophet, not for everybody. And one ayah says, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنْ, means stay at home. In the city of Medina, of course, there were other groups who would like to annoy the Prophet, say that they go and run after the wives and try to say some bad words, whatever it is. So there were different rules for them. And this is what happened. The other text is about al-qawama. الرجال قوامون على النساء. Now they say that men, they have guardianship over women, and since then they are inferior and they have to obey and abide by the instructions of men. And since they are inferior and they cannot even control their homes, they cannot control anything else, to have guardianship in a post, a political post for a woman. It means that she can dictate on so many, probably millions. So that should be stopped. You come to the other group, and they say this is nonsense. The first series of texts deals with the wives of the Prophet specifically, and you cannot extend it. As a matter of fact, in the early days of Islam, if a woman commits adultery, the punishment at that time is to keep her at home. And Sheikh Al-Qaradawi, a very famous, eminent jurist, nowadays he's living, he says, how come a punishment for a woman who committed a crime at that time, and that punishment had changed, you apply it to ordinary woman forever? This is nonsense, which is true. And the other one is qawama. The Arabic word comes from qawama. And the word qawama means also protect, take care, to render services. And in the Quran, so many words. Of course, I'm not going to go into these details. I'm using English. So the word qawamun and qawama means to take care, means to really be obliged as a man to render services to the wife, financially and otherwise. And they say in Arabic, addressing the Prophet, إِلَّا مَا دُمْتَ عَلَيْهِ قَائِمًا. Qawama, it means as long as you are serving them. So this is the meaning of the word. That's the other group. And then you come to a more sensitive area. That's the hadith, the tradition of the Prophet. They say that the Prophet once said to a group of women, the day of the feast, you have a defect in your religion and in your experience. But the word aql, naqisatu aqlin wa deen, and they captured that. And they tried to use it against women. Since they are inferior, and in religion, during the monthly period, they don't pray or fast, that is also something like a defect, then they have to kept away at home and won't be allowed to practice anything with that defect. As a matter of fact, if you dig into that hadith, you find something completely different. He was talking to those dominant ladies of the Ansar who used to dictate on the husbands and be tough and argue and so on. And he said to them, I am amazed. How come, and you are not that strong, be able to dominate and control the minds of your men, and they follow you blindly? How come? And you have a lesser experience, we call it, that's the explanation of the word, because at that time women were not really in the market. And in testimony, when they go to court, because they are not familiar with transactions and commercial transactions, If there is only one man, you can take another woman, but she must have another woman to remind her that this happened this way and that way. So that is a defect in their mind. The other group said, no, this is not a defect. This is a lack of experience. But in areas when there is a testimony in court, sometimes women are superior. They have priority. In areas where they know more, better about the life of the of another woman, when she delivered the baby, what time she stopped nursing, or anything of this kind. And then there is another testimony where men and women are equal. And this is sometimes in crimes or whatever it is, because the Quran was addressing the two equally. فَأَشْهِدُوا ذَوَيْ عَدْلٍ مِنْكُمْ. Minkum, from you. And in the Quran, when the Quran says you, it means both of you, men and women. So that is one answer. And they say that, look, women, they are not allowed, not asked to go and fight. It's not a duty. And not forced to come to the Friday prayer. It's all right. It's not obligatory. I will come to this in the last part. But at the same time, if she wants to do it, she will do it. But there are certain occasions when it is obligatory on women to attend, like prayers of the feast, or what we call it, Salah al-Jama. If there is something serious, and the Prophet or the Khalif, they want to discuss it, they call for a Salah Jama. So they ask the people to come. Men and women, they must attend. So they say that the fact that they don't go to the Friday prayer, it's to reduce the burden on them, because maybe sometimes she's nursing a baby or whatever it is, or cooking for the house, whatever it is. She doesn't have, and it's a weekend. Friday is a weekend for the Muslim. She's not supposed to go. Well, in the area of difference between opinion, then you come to the ijma', the consensus. And those who are against women, they said, well, during the lifetime of the Prophet or the Caliphs, no woman was appointed to be a ruler. Well, that's true. But they were not really in a position at that time to be the ruler in a place. I mean, you have to have the competence, the ability, even for men. You don't take one from the street and say, come and you'll be a governor of this. No. He has to be qualified for that job. They were not yet. But once they are, then they are equal. The question is the degree of knowledge and experience. It's not the value of the woman versus the value of the man. That's the opinion of the other. And some of them, they use the al-qiyas, the analogy. Al-qiyas, and it's also known in the Arabic, in Western jurisprudence. If there is a rule, and there is another case similar to the first case, then you extend the rule of the first case to the second case, analogy. And they said, since she does not go to Friday prayer, and she's staying. She has a man guarding her, and she cannot travel alone without a mahram, a protector. Then, with analogy, she cannot be occupying a public office. Of course, the others, they answered. They said, well, it's true that she cannot travel without protection. But this was in the old days in the Arabian desert, when the trip between Mecca and Medina takes a minimum of 12 days. And at night, they all come down and sleep in the desert. They don't want to have a woman alone among men. Nobody knows what will happen. So she has to have a man with her to protect her, or a group of women. If they are a group of women, then that is what they call it, rifqa ma'muna, a secured companions. So it's, the objective is here not a defect in the woman as much as a protection. But nowadays, if you travel with the aeroplane from Jeddah, Saudi Arabia to London, there is no danger which can threaten the safety of a woman. No need for that. Anyway, there are so many other things like this. They try to take things, it's an attitude against women. And they talk about the interest, public interest, al-maslaha. And they say it's in the interest of the society to keep women at home, to take care of their husbands and take care of their children. Well, there is definitely an interest for a little baby to be looked at by a woman. We don't say no, but this is not the common rule. I mean, there are women who already are grown up and they don't have baby children, and they can do some work and go out and make a lot of things. And they say, no, the public interest now is to make use of the experience of woman. So it's a matter of judgment. And then they talk about sadd al-dharaya. And I mentioned that if there is a legal means which might lead to an illegal end, then the legal means will be illegal. And they say, look, women are very attractive and they are tempting. And if they go out, poor men will be tempted. And when they are tempted, something wrong might happen. So it's better we keep her at home. That is sadd al-dharaya. But this sounds like nonsense. I hear some laughing people. That's nonsense, because it's not really like this. All right, people could be tempted anyway, and you have to really struggle against your desires. And this happened even during the time of the Prophet. And there are incidents at that time. And women were not locked in their houses. They used to go and deal in the society and do a lot of things. Really, those who said something against women are quite a lot, from the old days until today. And one great leader is a famous name for my Pakistani brothers, Abu al-A'la al-Mawdudi. My goodness, if you read what he wrote, maybe you cannot sleep at night. And there are the others, the other side. But there are those thinkers, not necessarily jurists, who think that it is better for women to take care of their houses and their children and bring them up. And this is the main role that a woman should take. And here, in the question of ijma', consensus, there is an answer. The answer that it's true that during the life of the Prophet, he did not appoint a ruler as a woman. But, all right. Later on, Umar, the second Caliph, he appointed a lady on what we call it qada as-suq, the court of the market, if you want to call it. She was there, and when there is a dispute in the marketplace, which was the main commercial activity takes place, it's like the stock market at that time. She is the person to judge and give instructions, and sometimes she can punish. He gave her a stick to force her judgment. So she was a ruler in such a way. And then there are those from the old jurists who said, well, woman can occupy any post except the highest post of the Caliph. They took this from a hadith, a tradition of the Prophet. The Prophet sent a letter to the Khosrow of Persia to tell him that I am a prophet and so on, so on, so on. So the head of the state of Persia took the letter and turned it down and threw it. And the Prophet was annoyed anyway. That man died. His daughter, Buran, became the ruler. And they came and told the Prophet about this. So the Prophet said, those people on top of them, a woman as a ruler, they will never succeed. So they took this hadith, those who are against the woman, and they said, look, they should not be the rulers. The others, some of them accepting the hadith, and there are so many things against it, they said this means the top office. Because that top office in the early Islamic empire has an obligation to lead people in prayers and give juristic opinion and does a lot of things which has a religious nature, and women are not really functioning as such. They don't lead in mosques. Something similar, we don't have women leading in churches or anyway. Others, they said, well, here it's not really a rule. He was talking, giving them an information, informative prophecy, and therefore we cannot consider it as a rule. It's exactly similar to what in the Quran, when the Persians came and conquered the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula, that is Syria, Lebanon, and that area, which was dominated by the Christians, Byzantine. The non-Muslims in Mecca was very happy. They didn't like the Christians, but they said, tell the Prophet, so he likes the Christians. This is what they are. So in the Quran came what we call it Surah al-Rum, the verses for the Romans, that the Romans were defeated in the nearby country, but they will come back in bid'a sinin, which is between 3 years to 9 years. And then we Muslims will be happy with the victory of the Christians. So that is a prophecy. It's not a rule. And this is a prophecy. And it happened. The whole Persian Empire collapsed. And there are differences among whether a woman could be a judge or not, whether this or that. I don't want to go into details. Time is running short. I come to the main contribution I did, that is part 2. In part 2, I wanted to show the real philosophical approach to the question based on what we call it usul al-fiqh, the basic jurisprudence in Islam, and compare this with the Western attitude. In the West, when women really wanted to get out and prove themselves, they wanted in the beginning to build it on Christianity. How to do this? They came and they, of course, there they thought of God as a man, gender. Here, they wanted to create a feminine character in Christianity by creating the image of Virgin Mary. So, and then also the Jesus in the sense of a feminine woman, because mercy and love has a feminine character. So they started, for those of you who went back in the movement of women in the West, he will find that. But then they didn't really take off. So they went to a secular basis, and women started their liberation and so on, not on the basis of Christianity. But here it's different in Islam. Now, I want to come to the first character or feature of the Islamic religion, at-tawheed, the oneness. In Islam, we don't have any division. God is one. The universe is one. The earth is one. Men and women are one. And in Arabic language, which is the language of the Quran, there are words which are both feminine and masculine. For instance, bashar, mankind, you say she is bashar and he is bashar. The one word, and Arabic, for those who know Arabic, they know that we are so particular about the word, whether this is masculine or feminine. But this is for both. Bashar, mankind, is one. Insan, human, is one. She is insan and he is insan. It's one. And Adam and Eve, they are one. Min nafsin wahida. One. And different from Christianity, in Islam, the sin committed by the two, we blame the Satan, as shaitan. He's the one who really pushed them to commit that sin. It's not Eve. and they both committed the sin, and they were both responsible for the sin. It's one commitment, one sin. Then, when they came down to earth, it's one. And so that oneness, at-Tawheed, is extremely important in everything. In this way of life for the Muslims, in their philosophy, it's not only that we worship a one God. Nothing can resemble that God. He is not a thing, a huge power. We don't know what is it, but it's a power. That's one. And everything in life is one. And that is the first step in understanding the philosophy of Islam. The second step is what we call it istikhlaf. Creating a representative, an agent, whatever it is. When God created Adam, even before breathing his spirit into him, he said to the angels, Inni ja'ilun fil ardi khalifa. I'm going to appoint down on earth a representative, an agent, a steward. And they argued with God, how come you put someone who might really do this and this and this? He said, I know better than you. And then he came down. So this sort of representation, the meaning of istikhlaf, everything we have is owned originally by God, but we deal with it, we invest, we do representing God. We receive the instructions from God. Both Adam and Eve, they are the first, and then all their descendants, they really have the same rules, and they have to obey the same instructions of God. So that is the second stage. The third stage is the instructions. Because we have, if I appoint someone to be my agent, my representative, of course I give him terms of reference. And here, it's a little bit in details. I hope you read and study it a little bit. We don't have too much time. Here, the instructions are divided into two categories. Ahliyat wujub, ahliyat ada. Now, instructions to do and instructions not to do. And here, it's for both, according to the Quran, and all the Muslims, they agree on that. I mean, this is not an area of disagreement. They both have to obey what God said. Here, the instructions, the duties, the obligations are also of two kinds. One kind, we call it fard ain, or that everybody, men and women, must do it. That's like prayers, fasting in Ramadan, whatever it is. We have to do it. If my wife prays on my behalf, that's not good enough for me. I have to do it. And then there is another obligation. I don't have to do it myself. Obligatory. A group of people can do it. Maybe I'm one of them. But that obligation, if they do it, then I'm relieved. We call it fard kifaya. If a group of people perform this, then I am relieved. And here, like for instance, jihad, fighting. I don't have to go to the army and fight. If there is an army appointed, they can fight. But sometimes the obligation, which is fard kifaya, not very obligatory on everybody, might tend to be obligatory. If there is a defense, if you are attacked, then you have to fight back. And that is really a rather complicated, very lengthy area, but both of them are subjected to these instructions. And these instructions, part of it is political. For instance, what we call it bay'ah. It's a pledge. If a ruler is appointed, now women, they do perform that. Men, they do perform that. There are bay'ah that everybody has to do it. It's obligatory, fard ain. And this is related to the religion, that you believe in a one God, and so on. But then there is a bay'ah which is not really very obligatory. You do it or you don't do it. Women also, they do it. And it's in the Quran. يا أيها النبي إذا جاءك المؤمنات يبايعنك إلى آخره ولا يعصينك في معروف. And if a woman comes to give a pledge to the Prophet that she will obey him, now obey him here as a head of a state, that is a political. And then the other thing in the political arena of Islam is what we call it shura, to give the opinion, and it's a binding opinion, not what they say nowadays in certain areas. Here, women, they did practice in this and perform. And there are so many incidents that the Prophet himself consulted with women. Salama. Umar ibn al-Khattab did the same. Uthman ibn Affan did the same. And in the mosque, when one day Umar ibn al-Khattab, before, usually in these days, they want to issue a law or anything, if it is not a very substantial, important case, they go to the mosque. But men and women, they come. And he told them that I want to put a certain limits on the dowry, that what a man pay to the woman. A lady stood up. She said to him, no, you cannot do that. It's against the Quran. And she recited what is in the Quran to forbid him from doing this. And Umar was astonished. He said, yes, you are right. You are right. I am wrong. That it shows that they do practice politically. And the fact that Umar appointed a lady for the mosque, for the market, is in itself very significant. And then women, they did really do a lot of activities in war. As a matter of fact, when the Prophet was in Mecca before coming to Medina, there was a lady who gave him the pledge that she will fight for him and she will protect him. That is a political thing, and it's recorded. No one can argue against it because it's so authentic. Then, after that, she did fight. As a matter of fact, you find it in Al-Bukhari or Muslim, and Umar was giving this from the Prophet, that in Uhud, one of the battles, the Prophet said, every time I turn my face left or right, I see her fighting with her sword for me, to protect me. And this was the case. They used to go with the army to nurse and so on, but when it is for a fight, they do fight. And in our history, one of the most famous, probably once in the lifetime of mankind, a battle in Palestine, in a place called Ramla, when the Muslims were invading Egypt. They left behind them all the women with the ammunition and the food and everything. The Romans discovered, and they thought this is the best way. We go and cut them from their supply. So an army of the Romans came and landed there. The women fought them. And it's the only time 100% army of women, 100% army of men. And the woman was led by Hakim. And they fought, and the woman had victory. Hakim was captured and took to Egypt, but Amr ibn al-As then was able to get her freedom when he established rule in Egypt. What I'm saying is that they were doing this, and there are so many cases in history where women used to go and fight and lead and practice and argue, and sometimes they establish a political club in Baghdad. The Kulthum, the granddaughter of the Prophet, was there, and she had a club, and all the men, the opponents of Muawiyah, used to go. The history books in Islam is full of these things, and it's amazing. You see what was happening in those days and what we face nowadays. And it's very sad, by the way. Now, I think I should not really take so much of your time, but I cited here a large number of women who became queens in Islamic history. They ruled and they were so successful. Of course, I didn't want to expand on that. I gave some examples of queens. One of them is Queen Arwa bint Ahmed. She ruled for 40 years. Her capital was in Yemen, but Oman was part of it, Asir and part of Saudi Arabia, and she was a very good queen. As a matter of fact, now in Yemen, in the capital of Yemen, a huge avenue is named after her. The best hospital is named the Hospital of Arwa. A large mosque in Yemen, the Mosque of Arwa. And there are so many PhDs, books, theses written about this lady. She was a jurist, she was a fighter, she was really something. I mean, that's one example. And then there are a huge number of queens in the history of Islam. You find it. I don't want to go into all of it, but a large number. As a matter of fact, my professor, Professor Anne-Marie Chimel, who read the Arabic text, and she looked at it, she said, yes, but you forgot 3 more important queens in the history of Islam. And she gave me the 3 names. Radiya Sultana, who ruled in the year 1236 until the 1240, and Jandu Bibi, also she ruled the year 1600, and another Begum of Bhopal, yes, she ruled from 1845 to 1926. Yes, so they ruled 4 queens in Muslim countries. But this is one example, because I didn't want really to expand too much on what they did, but I gave examples good enough for you when you have time to see what was really prevailing in Islamic history, and then you share with me, maybe you share with me my sadness of what's happening nowadays in countries they claim to be Muslims, but that is not Islam. And here, according to this theory, which I produced here, the oneness, the fact that God created us on earth to represent Him and to act on His behalf and to obey His instructions, and then the type of instructions which shows that we are here equal, men and women. And then I went through all the details showing that there is no difference in these instructions between men and women. That is, I spent already 1 hour and 5 minutes. This is, I extended my limits. I hope you are not bored. Now, I really would like you to ask me as many questions as you want before we come down to have some tea and coffee. Yes, sir.
Thank you for throwing the light.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes,
so everybody.
I'm a pediatrician at Kingston Hospital.
Yes, sir.
Just really thank you for throwing the light over the past and present periods. May I ask you about your future vision, taking into consideration all these recent changes across the Islamic world? In other words, are you optimistic?
Yes, I think I am. Under this era of globalization, those really narrow-minded people, they are horrified with the movement of liberalization. So now they are even acting against Islamic law in areas where there is no difference whatsoever, and imposing restrictions on the movement of women. That is a reaction against the trend. The trend is against them, and there is a limit. Now, everywhere in the Muslim world, now there is a movement in order to give women their right to respect them as equal to men, and to give them the right to function. And we need them, because the public interest, we need women. And there are so many objections. I did not, because some of them are trivial and nonsense. I think this will come to an end. The trend is against them. I hope that it will happen without an earthquake. It will happen smoothly, but it will happen. That is my way of thinking. I brought up my daughters to really function in the society exactly like my sons. I even called one of my daughter Arwa, thinking of that great lady, Arwa bint Ahmed, and my first name is Ahmed. So I have Arwa bint Ahmed. You see, I'm ambitious, and I think they will come. But all what we want is to have it all done under the umbrella of Islam. I'm very religious, and what I wrote here, I believe in it. And I think Islam opened the door. When you see in the introduction how the whole world was against women and what the Prophet did, it's amazing. It's a revolution. But that revolution, with the tribal mentality of the Arabs, with the help of the Persians at that time and the influence of the Greek, started slowing down. But nevertheless, Islam is Islam. It will not change.
But is it the environment or the tradition we will bring in this country now? We are first generation immigrants here.
Yes, yes.
I bring my daughter and my son exactly the same, hopefully to lead in the future.
Yes.
But probably I have the opportunity here, really here.
You see,
maybe back home it's different.
yes. I really share with you that worries. You know, all of my children, they studied abroad, in the United States or here in this country. But I assure you that they can balance themselves. It depends on you. You have to feed them with your ideas and bring them with your values. But don't create a gap between them and the society. They have to be part of the society. They have to influence the society with their beautiful values, and this is what it should be. So it is the social environment that is very important. The tradition is something really changeable, except when it is come to a matter of principles. This does not change, but these are very few things. And it's beautiful. I think it enhances the value of a human being. Nothing more, nothing less. So I think, I don't worry. If you take care of them, you are an educated person, I think you can bring good British citizens here. There is a school in California, in Los Angeles, an Islamic school, and it belongs to an Islamic society over there. Christians do fight to get their children into that school, because when they come out, they behave well, they are polite, they are gentle, they have affections with each other. They love it. And I remember there was a debate whether this is only for Muslims or not. And then finally they said no, 25% for non-Muslim, 75% for Muslim. And the non-Muslim, they fight for that 25%. So you give the example. Thank you, sir. Sir.
This is wonderful. I'm going to, my name is Robin Hanna. I'm a social worker. I've got Ismaili friends, and I know that they come out favourably in terms of educating women. But you did mention this thing, but naturally we tend to think about the position in Afghanistan, which obviously the opposite is happening. And I know that 3 countries have recognised the Taliban rulers at the moment. One is Saudi Arabia, which I understand you're from. One is the United Arab Emirates and Pakistan. And obviously what's happening there is completely in opposition to the progressive things you've been describing. But I'm very interested in your views about what should be done about that. I mean, this locking up women there so seems to be so out of gear with the rest of the Muslim world.
One of the grave mistakes of the only superpower, the United States of America, for a commercial, economical interest for America, there is a state on top of Pakistan called Turkmenistan. 2 American companies, they came and they explored for oil and gas, Delta and Unocal, and they found it, they discovered. Now, Turkmenistan has borders to Iran, and the nearest route for them, for their oil to be exported, is to the Gulf through Iran. But since America has allergy from Iran, they refuse to let it go. Also, that oil cannot go all the way to the northern port of Russia. This is what the Russians want, and America doesn't want that. They want an economical independence, especially for the oil they own. So they said that the best way is to get it through Pakistan, to export it from there, and Pakistani market can also consume that oil. But in order to do that, this country called Afghanistan in the middle with a civil war, and they wanted a stable, strong government. with the advice of the military, the intelligence of Pakistan, they said the best people are Taliban because they studied in Pakistan. All right? So America came to the French, which is Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and we financed that. And the Americans trained the Taliban, and with the Pakistani army. And they went and they took over most of Afghanistan. Of course, there is a Cold War. The Russians, they came running, and the Iranians are against it. And this is politics. This is the geopolitical problem, and oil is behind it. So it's not the question of Islam or not Islam. And those people, though they are from the Hanafi school of thought, but really they were influenced with our way of thinking in Saudi Arabia, in part of Saudi Arabia. So that is the question. I cannot offer any. As a matter of fact, America now is against Taliban because of Bin Laden. They also trained Bin Laden, and we financed, and we are also against Taliban now. Only Pakistan, because they still dream of that oil to come through their land. So this is a very complicated matter. You don't look at it from a religious point of view. It's much deeper, more complicated. Sir.
My name is Ahmed Zaki. I'm a fellow of the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies.
Yes, sir.
By coincidence, I happen to be working on the same subject as you, but in the previous period. And I want to take you back to the hadith which you quote, to which you referred very briefly, about the daughter of Khosrow, the ruler. And this hadith is in Al-Bukhari.
Yes, sir.
And you didn't give the...
I will.
So, the person who is supposed to have said that is a certain Abu Bakr.
Abu Bakr, yes.
Abu Bakr. And he said it at the Battle of the Camel.
Right.
25 years later, he remembered what the Prophet said, you see. And one person, Moroccan scholar, Fatima Mernissi, who is also a feminist, says, oh, if we are to follow the principle of Maliki fiqh, this hadith should be deleted. Now, it seems to me that this problem is not simply a problem which concerns Maliki, but it concerns all Muslims. It seems to me that this hadith seems to be at variance with Quranic teaching. And I just wanted your view on that.
Sir, I can write a huge paper about that hadith and how it is. It was from Sayyidah Aisha, was leading an army to fight Ali ibn Abi Talib, karramallahu wajhah, Imam Ali. And he was grabbing the robe of the camel. And then he said, I heard the Prophet saying, ما أفلح قوم ولوا أمورهم امرأة أو تولت أمرهم امرأة, different verses. Now this is Hadith Ahad. It's a one single route. We call it Sanad. And number two, as you said, he forgot it 25 years and then all of a sudden he remembered that. And usually Hadith Ahad, they don't take it seriously. Abu Bakr and Umar, they don't take Hadith Ahad, saying of the Prophet coming from a one line. It has to be from so many different to accept it. That is the second thing. There are those who say that we just completely ignore the hadith, we don't think it is true. Others, they say, well, it's all right, we consider it true. But because it is hadith ahad from a one single line, we don't take it seriously, especially in constitutional matters. Then there are those who said that this is said by the Prophet not as being a prophet. It's not a revelation. It's by being a head of state, and he's talking about people. And in the Quran, and this is what Sheikh Azali said, in the Quran there is a real praise for Balqis, a queen in Yemen. Solomon sent her, and she went, and she became a Jewish lady later on. She was praised but because if you rule not as an absolute ruler, then it is all right, whether you are a male or a female. But here, Buran was an absolute ruler, and this was the system. And therefore, we don't take this except, I don't know whether I go into details, I don't want the people to be bored. We have in Islamic jurisprudence al-ibratu bi'umum al-lafzi. You know Arabic? La bi khusus al-sabab. That when there is a text, we consider the general meaning of it, not the specific. But in other areas, you care about the reason for the text, what happened for it to come. And here is related to a people who stood against the Prophet, and also who have a very bad, defected system of government. So he's talking about that. So he's talking about one specific case. And we have in our usul al-fiqh what we call it waqi'at hal, being a case related only to one specific a rule or a saying related only to one specific case. واقعة حال. Add the rule here, وقائع الأحوال يتطرق إليها الاحتمال, probability, فيكسوها ثوب الإجمال ويسقط بها الاستدلال. Then you cannot consider the hadith. And this is a general rule. All the Muslim jurists, they accept that. But here, if you have something against women, you forget that. And then there are those who consider this only an information, as I said it. And it doesn't mean that an information is binding. He's telling that this this government will collapse. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less. And then in the interpretation, some people who accepted the hadith, they said this is only related to the supreme power, the Khalif, but nothing else. And this is what Imam Ibn Hazm said, that At-Tabari said that. You see, those great jurists in Islamic jurisprudence, centuries ago in the past, this is their interpretation of it. So the matter, it depends on how you look at it, what do you want. But this is a resume, I cannot expand more. Sir, over there.
Comment.
Age before beauty.
Me?
Yes, sir.
Women are not equal.
Why?
Just have a bit of patience. Anatomically, physiologically, chronologically, genes, they are different. And women are better than men in certain fields in life. They are more patient. They are more peaceful. They like to look after the house. They get pregnant. Men are better than women in other fields. And if you take some text in the Quran, like for example, polygamy, or take وللرجال ضعف النساء.
What's that?
the woman gets half what the man gets from inheritance.
Oh, there, okay.
All these you can explain according to the understanding of philosophy of life. You see, even an animal, male and male different. I mean, I would say I respect one. I think the Muslim woman, in many ways, they are happier than the ultra-civilized woman in America or here. I mean, we respect our women. We look after them. But I want to say, anatomically, physiologically, anthropologically, psychologically, they are different. You know, a woman is more patient than a man. That's my comment.
Sir, may I ask you a question? What is your profession?
I'm medical.
Medical.
I'm a doctor.
No, you are a doctor. I'm not a doctor.
Yes.
When I come to the field of medicine,
Yes.
I am inferior.
Pardon?
I am inferior to you.
No, you are not.
No, I am. No, please, I am. Because you know better, you are more knowledgeable. When it comes to the field of oil, you see, or Islamic law, you are not equal to me. I'm better than you. The fact, no, please. And the fact that there is a difference in the physical constitution, psychological.
Physiological.
Yes, that is even the beauty of it. If it is not so, life will be dull, life will be horrible. Huh? You know, let me, please, you ask me a question and give you my point of view. If a woman acts as a man, masculine, oh my goodness, I would resent her. If a man acts in a feminine way, I look down at him. You see, each one has certain values, certain characters. This is not in any way criteria for equality or not equality. This is in general. The depth in the mind of a woman, her patience, is a virtue. Okay? It's a virtue. The love she can give to the child is a virtue. You cannot give the same. Okay. So you are not inferior, she is not inferior. And this is how this universe can be brought together. Without the two together, we are finished. You see, let me then come to, you mentioned that inheritance. This is a misunderstanding of Islam. Because if you study the law of inheritance in Islam, you'll be amazed that in certain areas a woman will take half what a man gets, a male gets. In so many cases, they get equal. And there are few cases that a woman gets more than a man. This is the law of inheritance in Islam. But in the area where a female gets half what a male, there is something on the other side. It's a financial package. You don't look at matters one piece, selective piece, and you ignore the other pieces. Now, when a man wants to get married, he is obliged to pay a dowry to the bride. Number one, it's a financial obligation. When they get married, he is responsible for the everything of his wife, even if she is rich, and the children and everybody. It's his responsibility. If he has an aunt or a disabled uncle, whatever it is, according to Islamic law, and he has the money, they can take him to court and he has to support them. You come to a woman from a one father and one mother. They died and he got double what she got. When he gets married, he will pay from the additional half. And he has also to pay for the family and continue at that. And if he has something more, and there are some relatives who are in need, it's his responsibility to do that. But according to the lady, she is a receiver. According to this financial system, she will receive from the man who comes to marry her. And her money will be kept aside. She can invest it separately because she has the right to invest alone. Even if she is rich, he is obliged to pay for her and the children and bring them up. And if she has an aunt or an uncle, whatever it is, and they need, they cannot come after her. See, you have to take, and this is not a matter of equality or lack of equality. This is the financial system imposed. Okay, this is in the law.
I understand that. I'm saying a man and a woman, they are not equal. I know in Islam, why for
They are
polygamy.
equal.
I understand this.
No, I want to finish with the. I want to finish with the doctor.
One woman's voice.
Yes, thank you.
Pardon? No, please, I want him, if you don't mind, lady.
May
Okay.
I answer him medically, simply? Sorry, I'm a consultant physician at Kingston Hospital. But the question really, yes, if you meant that they complement each other, I totally agree with you. But the problem really, if
But
you
it's
look
not
at the brain,
equality or black
if you
equality.
look at the brain, a scan, MRI scan, or CT scan, I challenge you if you can tell the difference. That's the main issue. The brain is the capital. Yes, you cannot look at the brain and you can never tell if it's a man or woman.
I don't see
The brain is everything.
Sir,
let the trust proposal.
Yeah, because the brain is no one go to medical argument now, but the brain is the same.
let me answer you about polygamy, because you touched on that polygamy. It's outside my subject, but I have to answer back. You know, in the history of mankind, men, when they became prosperous in the jungle, because they go and fight and chase and do all these things.
Women don't fight.
No, because they take. No, they don't fight. Why should they fight? They think. They are thinkers. They are thinkers. Let me, please, let me continue. Okay. Then Islam came to restrict.
Thank you.
Okay, then that's equality, sir. And this is what the Prophet said. He said, "An-nisa'u shaqa'iqu ar-rijal." They are two equal parts. They complement each other. You know, without my wife, I'll be in trouble. She is the one who runs after the children. I'm busy with other things. But even she's a biologist, and then she studied law. Even it's in her nature, busy with books and all these things, but she never forgets the children all the time on the phone and run after them. That is the nature. This is the to divide the workload, but doesn't mean that a woman does not have the brain and the mind and the ability to think. You said it.
I did not say that.
You said it. And therefore, yes, lady.
I am Anna. I come from Norway, and I'm a scholar at the Faculty of Law spoken that it isn't a matter of equality, it is a matter of one, as you said, being one. And I have a question for you, because you said you had searched or gone through a lot of sources in order to build under this, or have you been to the Hebrew sources? I should finish my question, because if you read Genesis, for example, it's Ish and Isha, which is exactly the same word and means the same. Excuse me, I just wanted to change the subject here slightly. And Adam and Eve were also one, or at the snake got the blame, which ironically later became the symbol of medicine. But did you go to the Old Testament sources also?
Yes, of course. You find it. Have a copy and you'll find it. I tell you, but when I went to that sources, I felt unhappy. You see, because women are inferior. According to the Old Testament, according to the Talmud, and I read some prayers, a man, until today, a Jewish man in the morning, he will wake up and say, "Thank you, God, you created me a man and not a woman."
Yeah, but in the very, very beginning,
no, this is today.
Yeah, but in Genesis 1 and 2, you will not find this perspective, and Talmud, of course, has interpreted. But in the very start, that is exactly the same. And Judaism, maybe we can compare to some sort of old aunt, that whether we like her or not, well, Islam and Christianity have put her away on a nursing home. But anyway, it is the same. It is one. It has changed, as in Christianity.
No, today it didn't change. No, it didn't change, my lady, please. In Judaism, if you go to the old quarters in Jerusalem, and there is a book that my wife was reading for me about a lady, a French Jewish lady, who described the way of her life there. I felt so sorry for the lady.
I like it, I changed for the worse. With all the
Oh, I don't care. I'm not here. But I want to tell you something. I am, as a Muslim, I'm a believer in the Old Testament. I will not be a Muslim if I don't believe that this Old Testament is a holy book. I believe that part of it is amended and modified, and I disagree with the nasty stories there. I don't think this is divine. But the Old Testament is part of my belief. And I believe in Moses. You see, if he is not my prophet, and so many in my country, they call their children Moses, and so on. And the day that Moses escaped from Egypt, Muslims all over the world, Yom Kippur you call it, they fast. I fast, thanking God that Moses escaped with his people. I want you to know our religion. We are not against, but we are against the nonsense contained in there. But we respect. The Jews are the people of the book, you see, like Christianity. But we have a very soft spot in our hearts as Muslims for the Christians. I have to admit. But that's in the Quran also. Okay? Yes, another lady. You see, ladies are fighters. What's that?
I'm very happy for you to open up this debate, and I'm very glad that you mentioned Maududi, because I have a lot of problems mentioning that. A lot of people get offended when I say that. I find this book very offensive.
Which book?
Maududi.
Maududi. Oh.
But I'd like to have a little reply there, the doctor, because nowadays biology has, the evidence in biology is, indeed the evidence in nature is that males are not that important, but the female is more important, and males are more disposable, and they
You mean through cloning?
It starts not to get to the female sometimes.
Lady, you cannot live without us. Don't.
The fetus is the norm of every fetus is a female. There is no white chromosome that changes it into the male. And
Sorry, the fetus is it. When I want to talk about him, I don't say he or she, I say it.
well, but the norm is
That's the
the
right term to
female.
use.
So one could conclude then that the abnormal could be the male, so to speak, if you want to take that argument further on. And well, that is one way of looking at it.
You see, as I hate to see men looking down at women, I have the same feeling when I see a woman looking down at men and they can do without. No. We are created to be together.
But it is only in the imagination and in religion that the male has become the norm throughout history. In Judaism, in Christianity, and in Islam.
No, you read Maududi.
No.
Read Ibn Hazm, who is 6 centuries before Maududi. Read At-Tabari, who is 9 centuries before Maududi. Read what the Prophet said. You don't speak Arabic, unfortunately. Read what this man, the Egyptian, who was against women, and he studied what was prevailing in the city of Medina, and he changed his mind. You know, read these things and read how the environment, the social environment can change, and so on. You see, this attitude of hostility and one against the other is not really healthy.
I'm not saying I have this hostility. I'm just saying this is an argument that could be taken that way, and then there becomes a hostility.
Okay. I can argue with you until the morning. Sir.
My name is Ahmed Zaki. Thank you for a fascinating lecture. But I got the impression from
Yes.
what you said
Yes.
and from the discussion that there is some kind of a dichotomy between Islam and Muslims, Islam and the society in which we live. Do Muslims follow Islam or don't they abide by it? Why is it that this dichotomy is there? Why don't they follow Islam? And talking of dichotomy, you were speaking of Queen. We've had 2 prime ministers that you didn't mention in the 20th century, Bhutto in Pakistan and Chile in Turkey. But yet, despite the fact that there were women prime ministers, the rights of women did not improve. Not only in Saudi Arabia, as you pointed out, but even in Pakistan and Turkey and elsewhere. Why is it that people like you, jurists like those you mentioned, do not prevail, have not prevailed in the history?
Tradition. Bhutto, she was secular, I know her, and she was elected as a prime minister in a country where Maududi was there. You see? Yeah, no, sir. He just passed away 3 years ago, and I know the man. And I had a lot of argument with him. Okay? I respect him. That's his view. We might differ. But you ask a very important. It's not only Islam. Christianity. Read the New Testament. See the beauty of it. The mercy, the values. You see? Do you think what was happening in Ireland is a reflection of Christianity? You think what happened elsewhere is a reflection of Christianity? No. People act against their religion. In Islam, it is the same. Even in Islam, when beautiful instructions came, the Muslims, they changed. The restriction on polygamy, and I didn't go into that with the doctor, the physician. He left? Still there? Okay. Okay. You see, the Arabs, they love to have as many women as they can. So they changed. You see, even in jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence, there are texts so obvious, so obligatory in the Quran, which is changed in practice, and even in the books of jurisprudence, Islamic jurisprudence. And there is always a gap. You follow your desires and what you want and the way you were brought up. Sometimes even the way you are brought up and the traditions can give you the ability or the lack of ability to understand. See, this is unfortunately. I give you a very nice story about a great Muslim jurist passed away a few decades ago called Muhammad Abdu from Egypt. And he came to Europe for the first time. A man with his Islamic religious dress, and he went all around. He had a good eyes of observation and went back. When he embarked from the ship, some people, they came and they asked him, Your Honor, how did you see Europe? And how did you find now Cairo and Egypt coming back? And he gave a beautiful description. He said, in Europe, I found Islam. I didn't find Muslims. In Egypt, I found Muslims, but I didn't find Islam. This is known, and this is by a great leader in our Islamic jurisprudence. The difference doesn't make, look what Taliban is doing. If this is Islam, by any criteria, it is anti-Islam. And in other areas, I don't want to go into a minefield. I have to keep away. Sir.
Sir, how do you explain the lack of distinction in some of the modern Islamic countries where you have women had a considerable level of freedom, they did have a role in society. During the last decade or two, they started going back. They want to go under the veil. They want to stay at home. There is the number of women who are rather shrinking into this social activity, participation, becoming, there seems either it's a misunderstanding or they would rather play it this way because it is easier. They would rather do the traditional bit. And where other parts of the Islamic nation, you have women do not have the rights yet and they are fighting for it. In countries where, like Egypt, for example, they had the rights maybe during the last century. Now they are, some of them, or a lot of them, want to go back. They want to go back under the veil, they want to stay at home, they want to raise kids, and they want to become more traditional. How do you explain that?
My friend, this is a very good subject for another lecture. Honestly, this is an extremely important. I once gave a lecture in Beirut, and I called the beginning of that phenomena. I had a prophecy that it will happen, and I called it, this is a psychopolitical anxiety. Muslims in the past, with all the injustice inflicted on them by the West, whether during the colonial era or because of the Arab-Israeli dispute and the attitude of the West against the Muslims and the Arabs, they really resented that. That's a psychological, psychopolitical anxiety. In the very beginning, if you go back into history, they looked at another area to the east, an enemy of the West, to seek some help for their grievance. And it was the Soviet Union. And you find so many Muslim countries facing Moscow. They didn't find the help. At that time I said there will be another route that they go, and that is to see if there is anything at home to help them, and that is Islam. Now, there are so many differences from one country to another, but I think this psychopolitical anxiety is the common factor among all the so-called Islamic movements. And unfortunately, there are some Western elements who are really feeding and helping these movements, because nothing can destroy Islam as these movements. The best way, let them fight with each other. And then it really carried on. You find it in different. Sometimes it is the economical situation, as what happened in Egypt, for instance. Sometimes it's the political and corruption, as what happened in Algeria. And sometimes it is the fight against the basic values of the society, as what happened from the Shah of Iran, fighting Islam and destroying everything, and so on. There are additional factors. But this is a very important thing you are mentioning. But this is a passing phenomenon. They will never, never find the answer. Exactly as we turned our face from Moscow and we faced Mecca, we think we get the answer there. The answer is not from Mecca as such. It's from the revelation, the values giving, from the true values. Not to be so rigid, because by nature, if you are so poor, so hungry, so depressed, you do funny things, you see. But this is, in itself, I tell you, this is an important subject for a lecture, maybe for a seminar, not a lecture, because we have to have different views to come to the picture, and there were seminars about this subject. Sir, yes, I forgot you, I apologize.
Do you think the social change in the new era will retain the Muslim women's rights and political side, or do you think the economic pressure and the high cost of higher education for females in the Islamic State will retain the social rights to the women in Islam?
I think I answered this question. I said I'm optimistic, and I think women will really gain grounds and they will succeed. And it's not only a high education, you know, it's good to go and be postgraduate legal students and so on, but there are things that you get from life, not only from the school, training, understanding. And don't forget, nowadays there are so many new means of education, the internet, the satellites, and so many other means that women can follow. And by the way, women are better than men. In my country, among the first 10 graduated from a university, more than 50% are women. The number of women students are now exceeding the number of men students. I mean, they work very hard to prove themselves. And it's not only the financial thing, there are some other incentives that they do. So I am optimistic. Oh, so many questions.
Respected sir, I listened to your speech very carefully, and you have quoted these different examples of the women's ruler in the ancient time. But as you said, you belong to the Saudi Arabia, you born over there. What is the opinion? Do they changes in the women rights? Do they give any key post over there in Saudi? And if they do, I think that all the Muslim states in all the world, they will follow the Saudi.
Okay. I will go and pray.
Well,
Go and pray for my country.
The source of Islam is all the Muslims, the source of Islam is from Mecca and Medina. whatever they do over there, I think there is no objection to the word, they will follow.
I hope you don't follow.
What's your opinion about this? You see, do they give any rights in Saudi Arabia?
Sir, in Saudi Arabia, you have different views. But you hear only one view.
Well, as you said, both of them equal, men and women are equal. So why not they treated equal over there?
You ask me? I have the same question.
Because you're right to the topic, you see, that's important.
Yeah. Pray.
Oh, thank you.
Sir.
My name is Eric Bramston, and I've been involved for a number of years in debate dialogue. And I remember many years ago Muslims saying to me, before that dialogue, Islam is really the most misunderstood religion. And I think part of that misunderstanding is the view in the West, where there isn't a great knowledge of Islam, that it's monolithic. And sometimes when you talk to Muslims, they say, oh, well, the Quran doesn't change, not like Christians with your Bible. And they say that's been laid down. And I think what for me this evening has been a very fascinating revelation is a variety of interpretations. And what I would ask you is, do you think there's a chance or hope that in the West some more knowledge of a variety of interpretation, positive variety, can be, what can I say, made more widespread in the West, the knowledge of that?
I think we have to contribute to that, and I think a gathering like tonight is in the same direction, and I do things like this. But of course, you are in the same direction. You are a Christian and coming to listen to a Muslim. You see, through this exchange of views and information, we can really understand each other's. There should be a dialogue. I don't know, of course, there are certain circles who will hate to see this dialogue taking place. They will hate it and fight against it. You know it, I'm sure. And in Christianity, of course, we have a one Quran. And there is no disagreement whatsoever that every single letter, every single word is that which is revealed on our Prophet Muhammad. Of course, you have so many New Testaments, as you know, but you adopted now only 4. And we accept the 4 as Muslims. We call them the Holy Book. See? But Islam is a different type of a religion. I gave some little differences, but there are so many differences also. They differ, but we are supposed to respect each other's, at least from our side. We respect Christianity. But from your side, you don't believe in this man coming from Mecca as a prophet. You don't believe that the Quran is a holy book. That is a very serious disagreement. And I don't know how you can really do this. But then, in the old days, after the crusade, when the Christians came back, and they started talking about the beauty of the Muslim behavior and how they are, and they praised them. The Pope didn't like it. And he started translating the Quran in a funny way. I'm sorry, my father. He's a dear father. And so many books written about this very bad religion. And this Allah is like Buddha, like what? It's something that we worship, Krishna or whatever it is. While Allah means God. In Hebrew, El. In Aramaic, Ele, and so on. But it's only the Christians in my country, when they go to churches, they pray to Allah. The same thing with the Jewish Arabs. So But the way it is described, and unfortunately, this is deeply engraved. You see, nations are like individuals. A boy in the first 4 years of his life, whatever you inject into his brain will grow with him until he is 78 years old. And the European countries, before the Renaissance, they were fed with ideas about those horrible Muslims. And we have to fight them, and you grow, you find so many people who really hate the name of Islam without knowing Islam. That is a very serious problem. We are growing in a one village. You can not do without us. And we cannot do without you. We don't want to do without you. So this is a very important thing. I mean, but the fact that you came to listen to me and I was able to convey my message is a good example of what we can do. Sir, I think it is 9 o'clock and I appreciate very... They want to leave.